Hello and welcome to the 3D Blu-ray Bunker. This is a place for us die-hard fans of 3D where I look exclusively at 3D Blu-rays, not to do a movie review, but to focus almost entirely on the film's 3D, with maybe just a short word at the end about the film itself. And this time I'm looking at the 2016 film Passengers. This has an aspect ratio of 2.39 to 1, and it was post-converted into 3D. There are a couple of other films that this one brings to mind, one of them rather obviously being Gravity for a few reasons, and the other one is Blade Runner 2049, and the reason I make the Blade Runner comparison is based on the look of the film and the style of its 3D. This is a beautifully designed and shot film, with its 3D being all about depth and virtually nothing in the way of obvious pop-out stuff, and also like Blade Runner 2049, the film is absolutely full of symmetrical views with their own natural depth, always shot with sufficiently long takes by a slow-moving camera, and I think that these views show what an excellent job they've done with capturing that design. So all of these fantastic views have an okay 3D depth to them, although it's fair to say that the 3D is more of the gentle and natural variety most of the time here, which acts as an atmospheric enhancement to these environments rather than being obvious 3D eye candy. I really do think that all of these views, despite being relatively mild 3D-wise, all look good in 3D. I love a bit of symmetry anyway, and all of these symmetrical views also have depth designed into the scene, and I think it looks great. This one does feel like that transport on the right of the frame has maybe spoiled the symmetry, but it's still a really nice piece of design, and the 3D in all of these views does bring out that design and make the most of it. There's another little 3D film that this maybe shares one or two things in common with, called Avatar. There are shots here of people in cryo-sleep in their pods, but the views of the pods here never really come close to rivaling that sensational shot in Cameron's film. Still, there is a reasonable feeling of 3D present here, and that symmetry is right on show again. With the film being set on a spaceship, you can expect lots of corridor views, and again, the 3D here isn't as dialed up as it could be, but it's still a relevant addition to these views. I love the amount of variety here too. These aren't the same spaceship corridors slightly redressed and reused several times, but multiple varied designs all doing something a bit different and interesting with the 3D. So the curved corridor is maybe a spaceship staple, but in 3D it looks pretty special, the way the floor stretches out and disappears under the ceiling. I don't know how much thought was given to the film's 3D during production, or if the conversion was a late in the day cash grab decision, but from the look of so many of the shots here, it certainly feels to me like it was given plenty of consideration during pre-production. There's this corridor too, which is another fresh take, so it's got the glass walls stretching into the screen, and we can also see through and beyond the wall on the right hand side. It's a really nice 3D effect. The way 3D captures movement in corridors tends to mean that either the subject is moving through the corridor or the camera is moving through it, or both. But Passengers gives us a great alternative take on that, which is to have the lights coming on sequentially and effectively moving in 3D space through the shot. I love this. I mentioned that there are comparisons with the film Gravity a moment ago, and there are some very obvious ones, beyond the fact that this film is set in space with an extremely small cast. More than that though, there are shots like this, with a distant little figure floating in space sat deep into the screen against a starfield backdrop. And like Gravity, I'm fairly convinced that some of these starfield backdrops have just the tiniest amount of stereoscopic depth to them. It's ultra subtle, and even though it's maybe borderline imperceptible, it does make these views all the more impressive. Also like Gravity, which obviously predated this film, we get the point of view shot from inside a spacesuit's helmet, and there's a nice enough sense of 3D here too. Unlike Gravity though, most of this film takes place on board the spaceship, but whilst we're still outside, we'll have a look at the film's ship, another really nice piece of design, which sits in its own 3D space here, and there's another view of it coming towards the camera here, which is one of the film's more obvious bits of pop-out. I think the best view of the ship is in a moment when it comes up close to the camera and it carves its way through space in this lovely three-dimensional shot. This is fantastic. Now, I'm no rocket scientist, but would you really plot your space journey route to take you so close to a star? It looks to me like it could be a little bit toasty up here, but I'm glad they did this red giant drive-by, as Arcturus here is given a load of volume and it looks very big and solid and hot. As a generalisation, I think the most impressive 3D shots tend to be ones where there are lots of things on screen in different 3D space, which is exactly what's going on in this asteroid field, and I think it might be the film's best 3D moment. There's a vaguely similar sort of thing going on here in Jennifer Lawrence's swimming pool, with all those bubbles looking good. It's also the swimming pool where there's another one of the film's small number of pop-out moments with this big splash. It's very brief and not especially noteworthy from a pop-out point of view, but maybe they felt like they had to throw in one or two of these moments to keep that faction of 3D fans happy. And speaking of the swimming pool, that tells you that this particular ship is more like a cruise ship than maybe the typical movie spaceship tends to be. So there can sometimes be quite a bit of empty space in a few of the interior views, but they do still manage to give some 3D effect to these big wide shots. And other locations on board give the 3D something to do, like the restaurant here with its rows of lamps on the left and tables in the middle and columns on the right. I think this is a great piece of design for 3D. And the ship has another, more cosy dining area here, also a nice design for 3D with those star lamps hanging down from the ceiling. I said it before, but I'll say it again, this is a beautifully designed and photographed movie. As far as any conversion errors go, I didn't really spot anything apart from the standard issues with a bit of vegetation, but it's very minor and not too offensive. Faces aren't super solid, but in close-up they do have a bit of volumetric definition to them. They don't look wrong, but then again they don't look as solid as some other films have shown them. Obviously there are various bits of futuristic tech on show, in varying degrees of three-dimensional success. I think perhaps least impressive is this close-up hologram display that Chris Pratt's got right in front of his face. When we see the screen from his point of view, strictly speaking, I think it should be in strong 3D with lots of volume in her face because she's so close to him, but a little bit disappointingly, she's pretty flat here. There are quite a few screens in the film, and they went with maybe an odd design choice of using transparent screens, but with a sort of frosted look to them. So that means that whilst there is a view beyond the screen, which could have looked really good in 3D, it's a fairly hazy view, so the 3D effect is diminished, and also these screens are two-dimensional. The bit of future tech that the film does really well, though, is most of the other holograms. The display showing the ship here is okay, and I think the best thing in this shot are the screens beyond the hologram, which are made up of more than one layer, so this is pretty cool. It also looks great when it's framed by layers of other information readouts, like here, and it also works well with the characters standing behind the hologram, and I'm assuming that the holograms in the film were all natively rendered 3D, as they all look quite solid. So there are quite a few holograms in the film that are all done very nicely, like the display here too, or maybe my favourite is another one of the film's quite cool pieces of design, the holographic fish swimming around them here. Again, this is another bit that makes it look to me like this is either a happy coincidence, or more probably, I'd have thought, 3D was being given plenty of thought throughout the production. Where I think the holograms work best of all are where someone's standing in amongst them. Something like this was done in The Force Awakens, and it's just as effective here. These views are superb and kind of magical, and also from a storytelling point of view, these shots are especially effective when the information contained within the hologram sparks off an emotional response in the character, which is what's happening here. Now, on the subject of emotional responses from Jennifer Lawrence, there's a point in the film where she gets a shock revelation, and I try not to be the guy who says what the director should have done is such and such, but I don't try that hard, because to me, if ever a shot should have been given a zoom dolly, it's this one. That view famously used in Jaws, where the background either drops away or rushes forwards whilst the character remains the same size in the frame. It would be so perfect for this shot that my brain actually almost sees it happening even though it doesn't. Anyway, several 3D films have used the zoom dolly shot, and it looks even more incredible in 3D than in 2D. And the reason I mention all of this is because this is the film's great significant moment, but the 3D isn't doing anything to help with the drama. There's really no relevant 3D in this shot at all, which is a shame, as I think this could have, and really should have, been a moment with a piece of dizzying 3D. So just a very quick word about the film itself. I've seen Passengers 4 times now, which for me is a lot, as it only came out 4 years ago. And since the first time I watched it, it's grown on me quite a bit, both for its use of 3D and the film itself. It got a bit of a rough ride from the critics, who mostly did the critics' usual thing of focusing on one thing that they didn't like and overlooking everything else about the film. And whatever flaws you might think are inherent in the story, it's a stunning looking film, well played by the 3 leads, especially Jennifer Lawrence, who I think is excellent, and more especially still Michael Sheen, who I think is absolutely superb. It's often funny, and I think it's genuinely romantic, and did I mention it looks gorgeous? The film essentially deals with isolation and loneliness and the despair and desperation that can be brought about by it, and there's a dark decision at the heart of the film, which is what critics seem to have the biggest problem with, but I think it's possible that they sort of missed the point, because that decision is the absolute essence of the film. That's what it's about, and it's about the effects of that decision, how it plays out via guilt and anger, and the possibility of redemption, even if that might be offered quite conveniently. I do wonder if there's a fan edit out there that tells the story in a non-linear way, so beginning where Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence meet and building in the earlier scenes via flashbacks and then letting the audience discover the big thing at the same time as Jennifer Lawrence's character does. But as always, I do try to keep in mind that the filmmakers here spent years working on this, and us viewers give it a few minutes thought and then claim to know better, which is a bit silly really. Anyway, I've got to admit that I've kind of almost grown to love this film. I'm not sure how history's going to treat it, but I hope it goes on to be one of those whose reputation improves over time. Its 3D is all very noticeable, it's tasteful and generally on the milder side, but it definitely adds to the viewing experience. The only problem there is that the 4K disc is also quite stunning in its own way, so this is one that whichever version I've been watching, I can't help thinking about the advantages of the other. So I hope you found this in some way useful, and if so, I hope you'll join me again soon for another 3D Blu-ray review. Until then, thanks for looking in on this one, cheers for now, bye bye.